First of all, I would like to thank Professor Gerhard and Ivana Rench and Arne Stolberg for inviting me to this Congress. And I want to thank Professor Vajrani for this brief introduction and all of you for your kind attention. So I'm going to speak on Serov's third opera. He was Russia's most fervent Wagnerian. Shaliapin's amazing interpretation of Ilionka's carnival song, Shirokaya Maslenitsa, from Act 2, is, apart from a few other early discographical contributions, the most significant surviving recording of Serov's ill-fated last opera, Vrajya Sila, The Power of the Devil, 1871. Due to its striking originality, both in terms of content and style, the opera was performed only twice during its first season, but as long as the title role was sung by dramatic basses like Mikhail Sariotti and Fyodor Shaliapin, it remained on the operatic stage until the end of the Tsarist Empire. Yet the work never achieved the same surprising success of either Judith, 1863, and Ragneda, 1865. The former, a brilliant essay in musical Orientalism, fashioned as an Italian number opera, made the 33-year-old Serov the leading Russian opera composer at once. The latter, on the contrary, exhibits Meyerbeerian paraphernalia combined into an intricate pseudo-historical romantic intrigue. For his third opera, derived from Alexander Ostrovsky's comedy, Vika Хочется, так как Бог велит, Don't Live as You Want, but as God Commands, 1854, he decided to venture on with a completely different operatic project. A coarse, realistic drama set in the sordid milieu of the Muscovite merchant class during the Shrovetide festivities. The result was an ambitious, remarkable, and still unequaled attempt to integrate folk melodies and realistic declamation into what Serov called truly Russian tunes. Moreover, the playwright's pursuit of interdependence between fore and background dramaturgy, resulting in a successful and balanced narrative centered around the pervasive, invisible character of the Maslenitsa, that means carnival. At the time of his collaboration with Serov in the late 1860s, Ostrovsky was by all means a Russian major playwright, actively promoted by his close companion Apollon Grigoriev, who had joined him in 1850 as a member of the so-called young editorial staff of the Slavophile periodical Moskvityanin. Ostrovsky's earlier realistic plays enjoyed great and enduring popularity. In his dramas, usually set in the backdrop of Moscow's emerging merchant class, he had scrupulously portrayed the manners and morals of the contemporary Russian society with heavily idiomatic language, into which he often interpolated authentic folk songs. In addition, the dramatist had already tried his hand at writing libretti. At first, he had turned his most successful play, Graza, The Storm, 1859, into an Italian number opera for Vladimir Kashpirov. Later, he was asked by Tchaikovsky to provide a libretto for the historical fantastic comedy Voyevoda или сон на Волге, The Voyevoda or A Volga Dream, 1865. In May of 1867, Serov wrote Ostrovsky a lengthy letter attempting to persuade him to adapt his Bytovaya drama for the operatic stage. Byt in Russian means everyday life, since its inner dramatic force will demand truly Russian sincere tunes, entirely in character with the invaluable songs of Russian people. Ostrovsky agreed, though the resultant cooperation was short and plagued with conflicting opinions about dramatic strategies. If the librettists insisted on inserting fantastic ingredients in the carnival scene, then the composer would call for a tragic denouement, pointing out that the realistic depiction of Russian carnival drinking and merrymaking had to replace Ostrowski's initially planned sugary, feeble ending peppered with phantasmagoria. Serov's remarks were mostly appropriate, since the original comedy had many deficiencies. To begin with, its plot was overly conventional. Pyotr, a dissolute merchant of Moscow, cannot endure his strict domestic environment. Encouraged by Iryonka, a mysterious blacksmith, he tries to seduce Dunya, Grunya in the opera, the young daughter of an innkeeper, but eventually repents and returns submissively to Dasha, his suffering and lenient wife. Moreover, Pyotr's unexpected conversion has been long criticized for being too weak and psychologically incredulous. Serov's remedy was to have Pyotr kill his wife, persuaded by an evil Mephistophelian character, a move that was clearly modeled on Germanic romantic legends rather than Russian folklore. Still, it surely proved more convincing in terms of dramatic cohesion. The composer's uncompromising interference with the narrative, however, left him in the same state as the novice Tchaikovsky from the year prior. Ostrowski's enthusiasm for the project cooled, and the composer was forced to find another librettist. As a result, the libretto of Raja Sila suffered a similar fate to Serov's previous Grand Opéra. The text of the first three acts was the playwright's work, while the remainder was prepared by a couple of well-trained versifiers, Pyotr Kalashnikov and Alexander Zhokhov. By the end of his exasperating collaboration with Ostrowski, Serov expressed the gloomy belief that an evil star was weighing heavily on his poor opera. His fear could not have been more real. On the 20th of January 1871, the composer died of a sudden heart attack before the opera was entirely completed. Act 5 was composed by his widow, who apparently used the unwritten sketches Serov had played at the piano, while the composer, Nikolai Solovyov, provided the orchestration for some of the music in Act 1. Vraja Sila's protracted creative history unquestionably had a negative effect stylistically, yet the overall dramaturgy proves consistent with Serov's aim of writing a national drama about Russian people. Serov achieved this first and foremost by rejecting Ostrowski's modest idea of an operetta without recitatives, since prose dialogue cruelly shatters the unity of the musical impression. Both agreed that the playwright would have to turn his prose play into verse, just as he was doing masterfully in Grosat's libretto for Kasparov. What Serov sought after this was an operatic text full of conciseness and dramatic effects, even if aesthetical ideals were subordinated for practical reasons, as the verses were transposed to achieve the integration between poetry and folk song that both playwright and composer aspired to. Crucial to Serov's operatic adaptation, as illustrated in the detailed scenario he sent to Ostrowski on his second letter, 26th of May 1868, was also the desire for a simple and profound drama, rich in its inner strength and poor in lavish scenic effects. On that basis, the composer seemed ready to forsake the colossal grand spectacles on which he had made his musical reputation. The poet was thus required to condense the text of his own play in order to cast the entire plot around a continuous succession of unadorned scenes that included the truly Russian music Serov had promised. In addition, much of the prosaic vocabulary of the original was replaced with more colorful and lyrical language, derived from an imagery and vivid style of Slavic traditional folk poetry. Ultimately, and most notably on the overall dramaturgical level, the composer strove to exploit the inner ethical content present in Ostrowski's play. By expanding the role of Ilya, Pyotr's stepfather and an incarnation of moral order, and having him come back at the end of the drama, Serov gave the old Russian proverb that served as the opera's original title an effective, rounded thematic function. Analogously, Iryonka's much greater prominence, above all in the newly imagined crowd scene depicting the Shrovetide carousing in Act 4, provided a demoniac blacksmith a fascinating influence, under which the main hero gradually falls. Having decided to attain the realism of everyday life without ostentation, by means of unpretentious dramaturgical flow, Serov cast his national drama in a light musical idiom, reminiscent of the popular vaudeville of the earlier half-century. In 1863, Simeon Gulak-Artyemovsky, both a composer and a celebrated baritone, had already paved the way for similar musical treatment of a national subject with his Ukrainian Singspiel Zaporozhye za Dunajem, a Zaporozhian Cossack beyond the Danube. Serov's conception, however, was quite the opposite. Having become converted to the Gregorius doctrine that folk song is an organic product of the soil, he proclaimed that Ostrowski's modest drama of everyday life required a new musical style that is purely Russian music without any Western influence. In place of the great number of interpolated folk-like songs and dances, set in Italianate style, which his older colleague had intended as a singing vehicle for himself, Serov replaced spoken dialogue with a lyric form of recitative, and based Vraja Sila's vocal language on the inflection of urban Russian folk songs. The long-desired organic connection with the soil was thus created in the music itself, which Serov hoped to permeate at every level with the style of Russian Beethoven genre song. Despite the prevalence of rounded pieces, the captivating combination of naturalistic recitative, often peppered with harsh dissonances, and pervasive folk-like cadences had no precedent in the music of the time, since neither Dargamishki's verbatim setting of Pushkin's blank verse Little Tragedy, Kamieni Ghost, The Stone Guest, 1869, nor Mussorgsky's Gogolian prose experiment Zenitva, The Marriage, 1868, had been completed yet. In Nie tak żywi jak хочется, Ostrowski had used folk songs to suffuse the plot with an aura of national identity. Almost every character, even minor roles like Vasya, a boy and young merchant boy, sings a song, equivalent in its emotive content to an operatic aria. Continuing along the same path, Serov carried forth the playwright's realism, combining authentic folk songs, for the most part those cited in the original comedy, with skillful imitation of the Russian folk style. To that purpose, the composer retained many of the musical novelties introduced by Balakiriev in his 1866 groundbreaking anthology. Strict diatonicism, avoidance of the dominant harmony and consequently of the raised leading tone in the minor, sparse accompaniment, and irregular phrase lengths. Irionka's Carnival Song in Act 2 proves a suitable example. Constructed as a succession of rhythmic melodic ostinato variations, it displays purely diatonic melody writing, reinforced by the clear pentatonic allusions in the unaccompanied introduction to each section. Most astonished is the unexpected minor mode section at the end, where the composer makes use of the natural minor dominant and successfully eludes the raised leading tone. Aspiring to the perfect symbiosis between genre and dramatic content, Serov also tried to develop the expressive potential of folk song, making it suitable for effective dramatic characterization. The result was in many cases quite remarkable. At the end of Act 1, for instance, Vasya's Pratyashnaya, the most elaborate and melismatic form of Russian peasant song, serves as basis for a long dialogic scene between Dasha and Vasya. While the former tries in vain to inquire about her unfaithful husband, the latter ignores her and goes on singing of his own unrequited love for Grunia. By setting Dasha's apprehensive utterances, a quick parlante whose hints of chromaticism contrast effectively with the strict diatonicism of the folk tune, in counterpoint against the tenor unaccompanied song, Serov was able to differentiate natural singing from speech. Another outstanding example is offered by the Act 3 finale, when a spur Pyotr takes Irionka's advice that which will solve all his problems. greatly expanding the role of the blacksmith motif, itself derived from a popular song Kumanieček pobivaju minja. The composer set Ilionka's sinister suggestion to a joyful folk melody, while insistent balalaika imitations in the orchestra dominate the entire scene. Recurring obsessively with unbroken variation in its orchestral treatment, a device taken from Glinka's Kamarinskaya, 1848. The Kumanieček tune thus conveys Piotr's gradual, inexorable surrender to the hostile power, hidden under the gaiety of folk music. Now, if I succeed to, I would like to make you listen this Act 3 finale. Oh, thanks a lot. Okay, so we have to. Okay, that's it.
You need the presentation?
Yeah, also the presentation because I wrote the libretto. So the slide is the 8th. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, that's. Okay, perfect, thanks. Such a conspicuous presence of authentic folk songs represented a landmark in the history of 19th century Russian opera, while the extensive use of folk-like melodic ideas prevented any exterior decorativeness of the entire dramaturgy. This organic integration of folk material in the opera was mostly achieved on a compositional level. Both in Yudif and Aragneda, Serov had already used a rudimental fabric of thematic recurrences and motivic transformations, but only in Raja Sila did he manage to exploit their psychological and ideological possibilities to the utmost. The most pervasive tune in the opera, once again an adaptation of a folk song, the Pliesovaya dance song Kapitanskaya dочь не ходи гулять в полночь, can aptly be defined as a fully fledged leitmotif. Just a few months before dying, Grigoriev had seen the essence of Ostrowski's drama in the hidden but ubiquitous presence of an invisible character, the epitome of the dumpy and carnal Maslenitsa. Serov too, in a letter to the playwright on June 1866, had written, "If I come upon a folk theme appropriate to my needs at this point, I will build the majority of the opera upon it." Keeping his word, he treated the Maslenitsa motive as the opera's main recurring theme, emphasizing its symbolic meaning from the very first bars. The opera's Potpourri overture offers a comprehensive catalogue of thematic motifs, presenting from the very beginning the tragedy's dramatic plot. Divided into three parts, the last section being an almost identical reprise of the first one, it begins with an effective foreshadowing of the Schubertite joyful atmosphere. The opening bars introduce the Maslenitsa motive, followed at once by stirring balalaika imitations, set to an extending pedal point based on a swift sequence of interpolated seconds and fifths. Both themes are given great emphasis throughout the overture and reveal Iryonka, constantly associated with Russians' most popular string instrument, as the embodiment of the carnival bursting force. Another adaptation from the Kapitanskaya dочь tune, always heard after the Maslenitsa motive, serves for depicting Pyotr's sexual desire. The melody also occurs in his monologue in Act 1, when he expresses his determination to possess Grunia. Abruptly contrasting with the prevailing cheerful tone, two more opposing themes represents Pyotr's domestic tensions. The former, a small stentorian phrase based on 3 repeated notes, is connected with Ilya's rigorous moral code. The latter, which permeates the central section, is drawn from Dasha's lament at the end of Act 2. The metaphoric status of both Schubertite themes is then made evident throughout the first act. In scenes 2 and 3, they are heard from offstage, an open window in Pyotr's house, as if suggesting Carnival's menacing lure. The light-hearted folk song is alternated and later juxtaposed to Ilya's severe sermon, thus highlighting the harsh contrast between traditional household responsibilities and frenetic Schubertite merrymakings. Moreover, the recurring balalaika chords, which pepper the old man's complaint that in these days people in Moscow just want to dance and revel, sing and drink, sound tellingly dissonant. Once the alluring yet hostile connotation of both Schubertite themes has been defined, they are then given autonomous symphonic treatment, which changes their musical structure, character, and emotional effect in response to dramatic shifts in the plot. In Act 1, Scene 3, for instance, the 3-note incipit of the Maslenitsa motive is subtly foreshadowed in the orchestra, when Pyotr gives no heed to his father's warnings and vows to join the Schubertite festivities. In this form, it also occurs at the end of his monologue, Scene 5, just before the lascivious merchant first mentions the object of his desire, thus creating a puzzling association between Grunia and the sinister Schubertite background. In Act 2, the Maslenitsa head motive, with its distinctive ascending fourth, still plays a primary role in portraying the young girl as Piotr's innocent victim. After being first heard in the brief prelude, which introduces the in tableau, this motive returns as the main tune of Grunia's Liberty song, Scene 3. Its last occurrence in the ensuing act contains, however, an amazing touch of dramatic irony. As in the previous case, the motive informs both the orchestral introduction and Grunia's lament, but its radical transformations, ascending sixth and minor mode, seem to intensify the girl's pitiful situation. In addition, a variant in A major accompanies a part of the maiden's offstage chorus, thus providing an effective backdrop of cheerful joy. Echoes of the Schubertite festivities are persistently heard in the two central acts, as evident in Ilionka's carnival song and the three girls' choruses in Act 3. Yet the depiction of the Schubertite celebration in full swing occurs in Act 4, where Serov made extensive use of traditional Russian sights and sounds, sleigh rides, troikas, street vendors, bagpipers, bird trainers, as you can see in the title page of the first edition of the vocal score. Choral carousals and naturalistic genre music permeate the whole tableau in a lively picture of urban folklore that points ahead to Rimsky-Korsakov's several market scenes and Stravinsky's Petrushka. As expected, both the Maslenitsa motive and the ballet-like imitations are given prominence here. Interpolated among other folk tunes, they are repeatedly alternated and combined throughout the carnival procession. This scene's culmination coincides with the choral reprise of Ilionka's invocation in Act 2, after which Piotr comes definitively under the blacksmith evil influence. The last suggestive intrusion of the merry Schubertite atmosphere occurs in Act 5, when the same tune heard at the beginning of Act 3, then used as effective counterpoint to Grunia's sorrow, is mockingly set against Piotr's hallucinated declamation. Many critics, beginning with César Cuy and Germain Laroche, lamented Vrajasila's lack of integrity. Both Serov's radical change of mind in the middle of his partnership with Ostrovsky and his own sudden death certainly contributed to these criticisms. Had he lived long enough to complete the work, the composer would have likely amended his stylistic deficiencies, notably the pronounced unevenness between the song-heavy idioms of the first three acts and the recitative-based naturalistic tone of the last two. Still, the amazing symmetry of Serov's dramatic strategy has not been noticed yet. The three main characters of his own revised five-act scenario, Piotr, Ilionka, and Ilya, are accurately balanced in a palindromic sequence that fastens the fore and background together. The whole opera is framed by Ilya's threatening presence. On June 1868, Serov had written to Ostrovsky that this old man represents the alpha and omega, like the commendatore in Don Giovanni. The narrative arc of both characters bears indeed an interesting analogy. At the beginning of the opera, they leave the scene at once. Ilya goes off to attend Vespers, disgusted by Piotr's sinful behavior, but return at the end as unforgiving punishers. By peppering most of Rajasila's naturalistic recitative with Ilya's distinguishing triton-based harmonic style, the composer could hint at his unseen presence throughout the whole drama. The gruesome, enigmatic role of Ilionka represents Serov's greatest accomplishment in musical characterization. As a fiendish and depraved blacksmith, a profession traditionally connected with witchcraft, he entirely belongs to Ostrovsky's Temnaye Tsarstvo, Dark Kingdom, of the Moscow's merchant milieu, whose destructive power is carefully veiled under the mask of triviality and gayness. Ilionka's full dramatic significance can be analyzed in close connection with Schubertite rituals. Using Bakhtin's categories as described in his pioneering analysis of Rabelais and Dostoevsky's Poetics, Rajasila's overall dramaturgy may be indeed read as an early comprehensive catalogue of carnival motives. Coronation. Irionka's invocation song in Act 2. Profanation and laughter, the scene between Spiridonovna and the merchants in Act 2. The scenes between Irionka and the girls in Act 3, and the scene between Piotr and the drunkards in Act 4. Pageantry, without the division into performers and spectators. The Shruvetide open-air masked carousal in Act 4. And decoronation or mocking parody, the fight between Vasya and Piotr and the latter's consequent public humiliation in Act 4. From a carnivalesque point of view, Piotr shares Irionka's intense ambiguity. As a mask, a theme connected with the joy of change and reincarnation, with gay relativity and with the mere negation of uniformity and similarity, he epitomizes the carnival's capricious sense of identity and fascinating high-low binaries. Both in his dark, tormenting monologue in Act 1 and in the sparkling duet with Grunia in Act 2, Piotr significantly imitates the girl's musical idiom, thus betraying his sexual obsession. When finally the merchant comes in contact with Irionka, he takes the malevolent blacksmith prerogatives. Their lengthy duet that closes Act 3, exactly in the middle of the dramaturgic sequence, is the opera's culmination point, as it displays the role reversal between Irionka and Piotr, who from this moment falls under the latter demonic influence. Significantly, the crucial confrontation scene in the following act takes place in a marketplace, a space associated by tradition with capitalistic trade and transgression. In joining Irionka's evil design, Piotr thus sells his own soul to the blacksmith, losing his dramatic individuality. In light of the above, it appears quite obvious that Serov had valid reasons to alter both the opera's original title and Ostrowski's projected happy ending. The former, taken from a phrase that the dramatist had inserted in the fourth act of the libretto's first draft, was believed to be entirely in character with the darkness of the revised drama. The new title derives from the Russian word for enemy, or antiquatedly the devil, thus subtly alludes to the character of Irionka. Only a tragic ending, accordingly, could bring the narrative plot to its logical symbol and its strong conclusion. And the composer himself explained his new scenario to Ostrowski. In the original drama, a drunken merrymaker is led to the edge of an ice hole, but ultimately regains consciousness at the sound of a church bell. In the opera, on the contrary, the call of mating bells from offstage is heard after Piotr's homicidal violence has come to an end. His brutal domestic murder has indeed sealed the carnival's demoniac power over moral authority. Vrajasila left no operatic descendants. Serov's effort to merge organically folk melodies and naturalistic declamation remained a unique phenomenon in Russian opera. Strongly fascinated by the Meyerbeerian historical costume drama, most of his colleagues reacted to the opera's long-awaited premiere with unusual coldness or total indifference. Tchaikovsky considered Vrajasila Serov's weakest work, while Mussorgsky, the other thinking realist of Russian contemporary operatic stage, did not even record his judgment. Had he not prematurely died, Serov would probably have softened the coarsest traits of his musical realism, eventually giving up the far-reaching experimentalism of his last work. When he wrote his authentic autobiographical sketch, just a few months before his sudden death, the composer still expected to write another 3-4 operas. Of these, the first was to be the completion of a Gogolian comic fantastic opera he had sketched before venturing into his collaboration with Ostrowski. Till the end of his life, he also had plans to write a monumental tragic Bohemian trilogy in grand opera's manner and based on the history of Hussite wars. Yet Vrajasila's outstanding and original stylistic consistency remains Serov's finest achievement, paving the way for the symbolic tendencies of the late 19th century. Accordingly, this opera demands a long overdue revival. Thanks a lot.
Talks yesterday. We have a couple of minutes for questions.
Thank you. Your talk made apparent that this opera of Serov is a reflection of Grand Opera, and so he's making use of motif conducteur, and we have the act structure, the canvas, and couleur. But it's so striking that Serov, being the most ardent advocate of Wagner for almost 20 years, has not tried to make advantage of this in his own work. So you have not dwelt on this point. Maybe you could elaborate on this just in a few sentences. So in our Wagner conference, this is of course a point which should be made or mentioned.
Yeah. Of course, when I was invited here, I'm a specialist in Russian opera, so I chose a composer who himself proclaimed himself a Wagnerist. He was, of course, a Wagnerism, a sort of independent Wagnerist, because he didn't see. I think he saw only Lohengrin in Leipzig, and that's all. So he studied carefully all of Wagner's theoretical essay, but he didn't see any of his operas, and he could only sketch in his compositional efforts a sort of leitmotivic development in the orchestral treatment. But of course he was not a Wagnerist from this point of view.
This contradicts to what I've known to this point. I think he was personally acquainted with Wagner from 59 onwards. I think he knew most of his works by heart. So even if not seeing all of them on stage, but you're right, Lohengrin had been staged in '68 in Russia, but he had, but he has been in Germany an awful lot of times, and I think his knowledge of Wagner in operas was much more ahead to all of the other Russian composers. So this would be the person from whom we would have expected to give us some Wagnerian flair in his music, but he refused to do so. So it's a paradoxical situation, isn't it?
Yeah. Only in his first Judith. A succession of scenes, but it was his only Wagnerist effort in the opera, because in this opera the main topic was to integrate Russian folk melodies into a number of operas. So from the Italian tradition.
Maybe in part Herder, only 18th century Herder, who supported Shakespeare and who wanted Shakespeare to be a model, was that the Germans should find an authentic voice. Maybe the best way of following Wagner was to find an authentic voice for them. Anyway, maybe we should break now.
Oh, thanks to you.